So we begin Module 4, which is titled Assessment. This is an area that I feel very strongly about and have a lot of opinions regarding. So we'll kind of explore together some best ways to create and use assessment, especially in terms of data gathering and how to make that data speak to you. So, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be working with the concept of assessment. You're going to have an assignment to do, and clearly, you're going to have a discussion board to do. You can see for yourself the guiding questions to follow as you reflect for your discussion posting, and you can see what kinds of questions are being asked there. A lot of them deal with curriculum alignment. If you are unfamiliar with whether your curriculum is aligned, rather, have a discussion with your department chair or have a discussion with uh, one of your administrators to kind of talk through that and see what that feels like to you. What is an effective curriculum alignment? What does it mean? And how do you know if it's actually happening? So what I did is I kind of, based upon those guiding questions for the reflection, I wanted to kind of give you some more guidance in terms of how you would respond to your peers after you've posted your reflection and you read some others, and then how are you going to respond? So I want you to think about how the reflection you're responding to differs from your own experience. And I've given you some things to think about in terms of what does that mean, how does it differ. I'm not going to read the slide to you, but you can pause and kind of come back to these ideas and think about how you would structure an effective discussion response to your peers. And again, these are just suggestions. You're certainly capable of doing this reflection well, and you're also capable of making your own decisions about how you want to structure your responses. So now some information about the assignment. And again, you can pause this uh, here and kind of read through the slide. But um, there's the timing sometimes of these assignments doesn't work well with where you are in the semester or in the month or in the week or whatever. So do feel that you have permission to adapt to your reality. Don't say, "Oh, sorry, kids, we got to completely stop what we're doing and start a whole new unit because I have an assignment to do." Never do that. Just um, work with a modification plan and come up with a way that you can work the aspects of the assignment into what you're already doing. So again, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but I want you to think about the big ideas here are you're going to administer a pre-assessment, you're going to then teach, then you're going to administer a post-assessment. And the purpose of this is to kind of get you into that thinking space of first I need to find out what my students already know, then I want to find out what they already don't know and what do I need to focus on to teach, what do I need to reinforce that they already know, and what are new concepts that they will be so foreign and brand new to them. So that's the purpose of this. If you need to pare it down to a day's lesson and then give a summative assessment at the end of the day, whatever works in your world, please do feel free to adapt because I never want you to feel that you're just doing this work strictly to get an assignment done. You need to be using these as models for how you will actually teach in the classroom. So here's a huge question for you. We talk about formative assessment, we talk about summative assessment, we talk about pre and post. What's the difference between a formative question and a summative question? And so the answer is clearly there is no difference at all between those questions. A summative question and a formative question could be the exact same question. The difference is how I'm using the data from that. If I'm using the data from that question formatively, I am gauging whether the students actually knew the answer, how many students knew the answer, what were different answers that they came up with, and what does that tell me about my guidance, the guidance for me as an instructor about what I now need to do to respond to that. So formative, I'm just using the assessment to inform my instruction. And then a summative assessment, I'm using it at the end to measure what the students learn. And at that point, there's no going back unless you discover that fewer than 70% of your students actually understand the concepts. If you're missing a high percentage of the students, we generally believe that 80% of your students should gain the information the first time out without modification or without adaptation. But if you give a test and you find out that fewer than 70%, in other words, you're only having a 30% success rate, then several things may have happened. One or more of these things may have happened. The test fails, meaning that the questions are poor and confusing or just missed the mark in some way. So the test itself failed. The material that was being covered to get to the test is either above the level of the majority of your students and needs to be revisited, or needs more explanations, or the concepts just need to be retaught because they were completely distracted or not thinking about what you were teaching. Then the third one, and this is where you have to be a little introspective and don't be afraid to be honest, is the instruction missed the mark. The students were confused, they didn't understand, they didn't take anything away from whatever you were teaching on that day or those days, and or the materials that you used for support for the lesson, the textbook, your handouts, whatever, did not actually help support positive learning. So when that happens, you do be introspective and do not be afraid to take a hard look at all those three aspects and figure out what went wrong and what might I need to do next. So what do I do next? So not something that's going to be really popular with your pacing guide, but think about this. Stop and reteach. If you don't, you're going to continue to have landslides in terms of performance. Revise the language load or embed more explanations if that's the issue. Think about the time you spent. Do you need to slow down your expectations of your students? And again, I know that pacing guide is sitting there staring you in the face, but you also have real, live students sitting in front of you as well, and we need to do what makes sense for them. If the data shows you that there's a low comprehension rate on a fundamental concept, you really have to reteach it, or everything that comes next will never be grasped. Think about mathematics as an example. If students miss the basic formulas for a quadratic equation and they have no idea how to do that, then everything that comes next in algebra is going to be lost on them. So you need to come back and really focus on those fundamentals and then retest to make sure that learning actually did take place. And hopefully that never happens in your teaching, but if it does, it is well worth your time that you spend reteaching those concepts. It just does not hurt a thing, except, again, your poor pacing guide, and trust me, it's an inanimate object and it really will live. It'll be okay. The other thing I want you to think about is the use of your data. Data from formative and summative assessments is your friend. We really need you to depend on that data, understand it, because it is telling you a story. It's telling you the story of your learners. It's telling you what they know and what they are struggling to know, what you need to give more support with, what you can breeze on by because they already know it. So do pay attention to the data that you gain from formative and summative assessments. And then remember that an effective assessment does not need to be a formal assessment at all. Thumbs up, thumbs down, writing on a whiteboard, um, a quick answer to a quiz, think, pair, share kinds of results. All of those are totally okay and can provide you the data you need. The big deal is it doesn't matter how you structure the quote assessment unquote, as long as you can gather data from it. If you gather no data, it's just an exercise and you're grading papers while they're doing it, then you're not gaining anything from it. The idea here is that you got to get some data from it that is effective for you, and then use that data so that you can reframe instruction if you need to. And if you do those things, then you are good to go. So hopefully this 2 weeks is going to be um, interesting and informative to you. Again, if you have any issues along the way, please let me know right away so we can work on it. But hopefully this is a positive 2 weeks for you, and that you gain a whole lot out of this module. Thanks, and enjoy your next 2 weeks.